welcome everybody. We'll get started. We've got a few stragglers, but we'll get into it. Welcome to CWTL here at Granite HQ, joined by Brian Heatherich.
Hello.
Delighted to welcome Brian. And we're going to be talking today and having a general discussion, as always, around competitive advantage through neurodiversity with a spotlight on dyslexia. It's a subject that's particularly close to my heart. My youngest daughter's dyslexic. So just trying to do our small part to contribute to the conversation, which is important. Before I hand over to Brian, so I met Brian, I can actually tell you, in February 2006, 17 years ago. We did some work together at Australian Air Express, which is now Star Track and part of Australia Post. We've kept in touch since, as I've seen Brian's career from, architecture, integration, consulting, 9 months volunteering as a family in Vanuatu.
Yeah.
As well, and then went back to rebadging as a sort of a head of security.
Yeah.
So multi-talented, a very experienced technology business leader in Melbourne.
Or just been able to bluff very well.
Could be. No comment, I mean. Anyway, without further ado, I'll hand over to Brian.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, it's been a great relationship over the last, people like Mark Carter, I've sort of been alongside as well, and just seeing your organisation grow, and what a great venue and what a great thing to sponsor. So thank you for the opportunity of allowing me to speak today. So if you're interested in who I am or where I come from, in LinkedIn profile, you can have a look at that. I'm not here as a professional capacity. I'm here as someone who's dyslexic, someone to be able to discuss what is very passionate and close to my heart. And one of the things that I really want people to leave with today, or two things actually, is a better understanding of what dyslexia is, and secondly, how it's important in today and tomorrow's workforce, and why it actually is a positive and an important area to focus on. As I said, my aim is to be as open and as transparent and honest about dyslexia as I can, because I'd love to be able to share my lived experience and what research shares, so that you walk away today having a better awareness of what dyslexia is, what being neurodiverse is, and the benefits that an organisation can achieve through looking at that in a little bit more detail. A couple of aspects. I'm not a professional in this area. This is based on my own research. It's based on my own passion. Others will have different experiences, perceptions and knowledge. As with any diverse community, it is diverse. It's a point in time. So as I learn a lot about myself and about my condition, and what is part of my condition, what is not, that will change. So if I have a presentation tomorrow or next week, it may change depending on how my journey is going. And I also recognise that as one neurodiverse condition. There's other people here, I've talked to other people who have autism in the family, and other sort of areas, ADHD. I talk to dyslexia because that's my lived experience, that's my diagnosis, but I don't discredit other ones. So please keep that in mind, that I talk about a wider one, but focus on my own experience. All right, what are we going to cover today? What is dyslexia? You'll walk away knowing what is and what isn't. A little bit around my journey to this point. Dyslexia in the workplace. What does research say? Why is it good? Why is it bad? What are some of the challenges? Why it matters to organisations. Some of my workplace experience, the good and the bad. And some ideas for some of you who are interested in sort of preaching the news out to your organisations on some ideas on how to actually make the first step or make a continued step. And some of you may be already doing that. A couple of memes before I continue. I love these. These are some of the best ones. I'll just quickly let people... What I do find though, when you go through and start looking at some of this, the overall perception of dyslexia is it's a word confusion issue. And one of the things you'll find out today, that it's more than just that. Right, before we continue, before we get sit down and serious, I thought I'd show some of these. These are some of the people who are actually dyslexic in our community, or in other people's community. I'll pause for a little bit just to let people have a look. Now, some of them you might be surprised at, some of them you probably already know, and some of them I'm a bit sceptical of. I think there's a little bit of dyslexic or neurodiversity grandstanding. People like Albert Einstein, Da Vinci. I'm not sure how they realise that. There's a bit of debate. So I think, in general, there's a lot of really good names in there regardless. But I'd like to also take a little bit of a pragmatic approach to say, well, maybe people are taking a bit of liberty. So as you can see, the big slide from this is we walk amongst us, or amongst you. A bit like with zombies. We're there, but people don't know. All right, a little bit about my journey. Now, I'm going to have to refer a little bit to my notes because one of the things about being dyslexic is my working memory. So excuse me if I have to sort of point just to sort of keep going. So when was I diagnosed? I was diagnosed probably about 10, 15 years ago while working at a Tier 1 organisation. And because I had some issues around the written documentation and the high levels that a typical Tier 1 would usually require. But before I continue from there, let me roll back all the way back to the beginning. As an underdiagnosed child at school, I'd always struggled. And as typical of many dyslexics of my generation, I was told that I was smart enough, I could have conversations and really engage, but I was lazy. And that I needed to try harder. And that is a very common theme that I have when I talk to other people who are dyslexic, in that there's a common message and you hear it time and time again, you're lazy. So, in hindsight, I was not the monkey being asked to climb a tree. I was more like the fish. Regardless of how hard I tried, I was always at the bottom of the class. And at the time, everyone was ranked, everyone did the maths test, and there I was at the bottom. And I hated those bits. In spelling tests, I was always at the bottom. And I tried, and I never got there. Until, pretty much, I just gave up altogether. And I became a distraction. I became a class distraction and the joker and the person distracting myself and distracting others. This ended up in secondary school, where I was told a number of times by parents, teachers and my kids in my class that I would never amount to much. I would be in jail by the time I was 21. And that message is also a very common trait with dyslexics and other people who are neurodiverse in a standardised system, is that they're told time and time again that you're never going to amount. Let's think about a smaller role. Let's think about something which is not as, which won't, you're only good for that. Which probably reflects that there is an overrepresentation in jails of people who are neurodiverse and people with learning disabilities. So, year 11, I was told, that's it, no more. And so I went out and got a trade. Unfortunately, the trade was no good because it also required fine, good working memory, measurements, details, and everything which I'm not good at as someone who's dyslexic. So I managed, even because of my dyslexia, my passion for IT, and a bit of determination and rat cunning, I found myself getting into the IT industry. And I actually found, and with an IT industry as consulting, and I actually found that some of the stuff that I was doing, firstly I enjoyed, because it's all about new stuff, beautiful. And the good thing about it, someone who's dyslexic, they love learning. So all of a sudden there's this new, always brand new environments to learn about. And I was actually very good. I was able to connect with people. I was able to understand where they're from and understand requirements, and almost to a point where all these requirements coming in, multiple voices, that I could actually start to pick themes through what different people were saying. And I really enjoyed what I was doing. So I was like, wow, where's this coming from? But I was continually having issues with my documentation. Got myself diagnosed, and back then, we're not where we are now. And 10 days after submitting my diagnosis, I was put on management performance and managed out of the organisation. I'm glad things have changed, and I hope that doesn't happen in organisations today. Ironically, the HR person in charge of managing me out was a lead for diversity and inclusion. But besides that bad experience, what the diagnosis gave me was that certainty that I wasn't dumb, that there was a reason why I was at the bottom of a class. And that's where that, in understanding it and all of that, has been a long journey for myself. And as I said to you in the earlier one, it is something which I continue with today. Yeah, and it also showed me that there's going to be things I'm never going to be good at. So, dyslexia, what is it? This is the best definition. And again, there's not a lot of research. There's still a lot growing in this area. So again, this may change as we start to land and mature our understanding. It's a genetic difference in an individual's ability to learn and process information. I'll let this sit for a while. So what are the challenges as someone with dyslexia? What are the typical challenges? And again, not everyone has the same degree of this. Here are a number of them. I won't go through each one for the sake of time, but I can go back and talk. Writing, working memory, spelling, reading, motor control, listening, and spatial and temporal, trying to understand where each others are. So you look at that and you go, all right, no, you'll probably be along with 97% of people who were interviewed in a survey recently and said and believe that dyslexia is nothing other than a disadvantage for someone, those poor people, you know, suffering all those issues. How can they survive in the organisation? But there's an upside. Dyslexics are very good at a number of things. Communicating with each other, telling a story, imagining new ideas, putting a new spin on a typical idea, visualising, understanding where people need to be and where the future lies and building that roadmap to it, exploring, being passionate about new ideas and always asking the question, why is this, why is that? Connecting, getting close to people, empathising with them, communicating those ideas and understanding where they're from. And reasoning, being able to logically put different bits of a puzzle together and build that puzzle and that frameworks. So as you can see, there are a lot of benefits to being dyslexic, and I can tap into a lot of those. But the question I ask myself, and probably some of you here probably ask yourself, we all have strengths and weaknesses. What makes the dyslexics different? Why are they so different to everyone else who has strengths and weaknesses? The next slide is where the one thing I want you to walk away with. This is a key message for today. If you leave with nothing else, remember this and the next message. Dyslexia is not tied to IQ. What dyslexia is, as you can see here, is about peaks and troughs. It's all about peaks and troughs. The blue represents someone who's neurotypical, as they call it, or non-dyslexic. And you can see that between the strengths and weaknesses is a lot shallower than someone who is dyslexic. So I have these amazing abilities in some areas, but they're compensated by amazing weaknesses in other areas. As you've seen, you know, writing, reading, and some of that working memory. And that is where the big difference, and that's where it starts to become a disability. And I call it a disability because we're living in a neurotypical world, and the only reason why it is a disability is because we work in that neurotypical world. The second key message is that the key difference is spikes in the profile. High-performing dyslexics are very intelligent, often out of a box thinking is a problem. This is research which has shown time and time again. When you get them in the right situation, they can perform really well. So they offer a lot of really strong skills that organisations can tap into, but are often overlooked. But they also come with a lot of challenges that organisations need to be able to adapt to ensure that the best comes out of them. So what does research suggest about where dyslexics in the workplace are at the moment? All right, what we know and what research suggests is about 10 to 15% of the population is dyslexic. Some research actually suggests up to 20%, but it depends on what research and what the definition is. So we can sort of say 10 to 15 safely and then 20 at the beginning. So within an organisation, research suggests only 1% of dyslexics make it to a leadership or a leader role, influencing role within a corporate environment. Now, I'm not really good at maths, but I reckon that looks like a bit of an underrepresentation here. So where do they go? I've talked already about that. There's already a lot of people in jail. There's other aspects. What research also suggests, up to 40% of dyslexic have been found to be entrepreneurs. Why is this? Research continues by suggesting that organisations are not built for someone who's dyslexic, so they leave to start their own roles and be able to be in an environment that they can shine in their strengths and be supported in their weaknesses, and that they can control the environment that they're in, as opposed to being in a corporate environment where you have to be part of a standardised system.
Do you think there's a bit of a, because there's arguably a stigma, then there might be a lot of corporate leadership who are unwilling or undiagnosed dyslexia? I'll give you an example. I was speaking with the CIO of one of the biggest employers in Australia last week, talking about why programs fail. And the discussion was along the lines of execs having very short attention spans and execs also like visual. So I don't know if people have got a similar experience. So I am wondering if there's still a bit of a social stigma, a corporate stigma, that a lot of people just aren't brave, can't for whatever reason say, yeah, you know, that is me. Do you think there might be a bit of that as well, or not so much?
I think there is. I think, and we'll go into a little bit more around the challenges. But yeah, I think that those who can make it, and there is a lot of undiagnosed. I've come in my conversations with this, and a lot of people say, I think I am, and they could talk through some of the symptoms, and you go, oh, well, there's probably a good proportion of you, good likelihood. I don't know. Yeah. I think there would be, but I think there's a real struggle. The issue that I found is moving from that lower part of the organisation, moving up into the organisation, you have to be able to fit in. And often meeting those expectations and being told that your documentation's no good and constantly being told that, you often go, well, there's a better alternative to me. So those who actually get to the top are really unique individuals who have managed to survive moving up and be able to get there. So, yeah. And then by the time they get there, they don't want to know about, they've learnt the hard lessons, and it's like, let's just move on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. Yep. So, why does this matter for an organisation? We've obviously found different people. A bit of a fun fact here, they reckon that up to, again, 40% of self-made millionaires, so these are people who haven't inherited money and have made their millions, are actually dyslexic. Are dyslexic. So there is so other than thinking it's 90%, like 97% of people who think it's a bad thing, there is actually an upside of people who are very successful, as you saw in the earlier slide, who are dyslexic. So what does it matter to organisations? We all know we're moving into a fourth industrial revolution. New skills are starting to have to come out. Why? And the old skills are starting to become less and less important as new technology comes in. So organisations need to start to understand what are the skills which they require to remain competitive and to remain relevant into the future as we move more and more into the fourth industrial revolution. The World Economic Forum a few years ago actually had a look at what are the skills which are going to be increasing as we move more and more into this new industrial revolution. And what they've suggested and what they've found is that these top areas are the key areas that organisations will need to start to focus on as important skills into the to remain competitive and to be successful into the future. Now, if you look back at some of the skills that a dyslexic has, starts to be a lot of alignment there. So a few years ago, Ernst & Young and an organisation called Made by Dyslexia put together a report and tried to look at looking at the future skills and trying to understand and map them across what are the dyslexic strengths to understand where a dyslexic person will fit into the future workforce and what the alignment is. All right, this is a very busy slide, so let me just walk you through it. So the Y is about, I can't really see, is a typical dyslexic capability going from low to high. So at the higher end is where dyslexic strengths are. Along the X is a competency demand. So as we move to the left, it's declining competencies as opposed to competencies coming up. And one of the things that you notice is that there's a lot of skills that someone who's neurodiverse or someone who's dyslexic has as we're starting to move into the future generation. So there's a strong alignment there between what the World Economic Forum says is important and alignment within dyslexic makeup. So quickly, the enhanced tasks and new roles will be created that match closely with strengths of dyslexic thinking. And that's the overall outcome that we have from that. So as you can see, that there is the future. This just helps underscore the fact that the future workforce, future capabilities, future needs, innovation. There's a lot of and the lack of current people in the workforce who are dyslexic. There's a real mismatch. And so there's something that's a real call to action for people and organisations to remain relevant, to start to look at that as a really strong pool to tap into to help their organisation remain relevant. All right, so a couple of highlights. So this is a little bit more about my own personal journey, and I have to admit that there's a lot of highlights being dyslexic and some of the ups. I've had a really interesting career. I have loved the IT industry. I have loved the work that I do. I love working with the people aspect of IT. The business requirements, capability, architecture, roadmaps, innovation, design thinking, security and practice management. Love it. Absolutely had some great experiences. I've also got a number of career awards recognising my efforts. Now, the interesting thing, these have all happened in the first maybe 12 months of being in a new organisation. And I get the feeling that it's before my weaknesses start to sort of come up, and I become, because people get used to you, and then all of a sudden the problems about spelling and writing and presentation and that start to pop up. So I've been very fortunate still to be able to receive a number of those awards. Here's a really interesting one. As I said to you earlier on, used to be at the bottom of a class. And this talks a little bit about accommodations, and some people say accommodations is an easy pass for people. So Vic Uni, rather than doing 2 to 3 subjects or 4 subjects a semester, like most universities, they focus very much on one subject for an intense period of 4 to 8 weeks. That one simple change has meant for me going from usually the bottom of a class to being the top of a school and winning the Ducks of the award. Now, I don't do this to grandstand myself, more about the fact that a simple accommodation has meant that I've been able to fulfil my potential in an area which is traditionally a weakness for myself. Some of the key challenges. The balance, that journey, trying to work out what is it about me that is dyslexic and that I can say, yeah, I'm never going to improve. And what is it about me that's just a grumpy old 50-year-old? And being that balance. And so I'm not saying everything is part of that condition, but understanding that journey. Physical disability. I've got a cousin in a wheelchair. We had a discussion around disabilities in the workplace and stuff like that. And he mentioned to me, and it resonated quite well to me, is that he said it's sometimes harder for someone like yourself because your disability is invisible. At least with me, people see that, you can't walk, so we're not going to ask you to run. But you try to do that to someone with an invisible disability and say, you need to write better. You're already at the back point. So often what I do is as part of the scales is I go, what if this is a physical disability, how does that compare? And that's my litmus test. So that's something to really consider when you're working with someone who's neurodiverse or starting to build structures, is trying to understand what their world is and what they can do, or the fish in the tree approach. Many organisations are the supermen, and to show weakness in an organisation can be problematic. And this is to a little bit point what we were talking about earlier, is that to go up, you have to be seen as strong. And some of the tier one organisations that I've worked in, especially, it's about being the best and all of that. And there is no room to be seen as having a weakness. Thinking differently to the rest of a crowd, and that constant not being acknowledged for some of the ideas which will be different and understood, and to be thinking against what everyone else is thinking. Imposter syndrome. Who here has had imposter syndrome in the past? Yes, we all have it at some stage or another. But I have this dirty secret called dyslexia, which I don't try to bring out when I feel uncomfortable. But I know it will come at some stage, and that will emerge as part of that. Filling in forms and documentation. The way to really scare me is to give me a 20-page document form to fill out. Absolutely hate it. Documentation is also a struggle, as I've mentioned earlier on. Asking for accommodations. This fits down into sort of the Superman area. And it's difficult to actually ask for accommodations. And I've tried to do it before, and I've gone into an organisation more recently and said, hey, I'm dyslexic, I need this, this and this. And at times I'm treated like a wounded bird. And that, oh, you poor thing. And I'm like, well, no, I'm not a wounded bird. I just need these accommodations to help me get to the role that I want. And it is a difficult thing for organisations to get their head around as well, is to sort of that the diversity without being overly, what's the right word, overbearing. Being that fish in a tree, being given the assessment, assuming that you need to be able to climb a tree when you're a fish, and being able to be in an environment that assesses your performance on the way that you swim rather than the way that you climb a tree. Many organisations don't have advocates, and being able to have that soft advocate to sort of help iron out, that third person to be able to help iron out issues which emerge and to help understanding within an organisation. And here are a couple of really choice quotes that I've had in the last few. At the top, you're having problems with taking on feedback. When you try to express that, I can't do this because I'm dyslexic, I'm never going to be able to, well, it's obviously a you problem, not an us problem. I have who has dyslexia, and this is very much, I found this in engineering circles, that someone who knows someone who has dyslexia, and I'll tell you what your condition is all about. Thank you very much. I know my own lived experience as part of that. Oh, you're dyslexic. I thought you were just retarded. Meant as a joke, but there's that sting at the end of a joke. And there was a choice one from the tier organisation one I talked about before. My boss telling me, oh, people with disabilities should not do consulting. Now, that sort of understanding, I'm hoping is changing, but some of these quotes are sort of in the last few years. So we've still got a long way to go. So for those of us, I'm about to wrap it up and start to have some conversations. For those of us who want to start to make some changes in the organisation, what are some considerations? Firstly, build a neurodiversity business case. Why is that important? To be able to have a document to see why is neurodiversity in the organisation important, why is it a business benefit, and what are the areas that we're going to do. So that, therefore it needs to make money. We need to be profitable. We're not a charity, and that is a recognition that having diversity in the organisation is actually a business competitive advantage. A policy. Putting a policy in place to say, this is how we as an organisation is going to manage neurodiversity, so that everyone who's unsure about it can pull around that, focus around that stake and go, this is what we mean as an organisation. My current organisation, I've not actually told them that I'm dyslexic, because I do not have a neurodiversity policy. They are very immature at the moment around that. They recognise that, and I'm helping with that, but I do not feel it's a comfortable place to let them know. It will come out in future, as I said. I'm still in the stardom area where I'm doing everything right. That's not going to continue, I know that.
Do you think that demonstrates really that although most companies have got DEI policies now. I was having the conversation again around today's event, and for DEI policies, most companies just defer to gender.
Gender is the easy
benchmark. So it's still very narrow. Yeah. People don't really get the whole bigger picture yet.
That's right, and my organisation, and gender has done a really great job. They've fought a very hard battle. And so we can really tap into some of their experiences to understand how we then start up a wider understanding of diversity and inclusion.
But again, to your point earlier, it's not always visible, but it's clearly much more visible.
Yes. And a simple thing like having a diversity inclusion out there and starting to look at, is a really good start for someone like myself to getting people into the organisation. As you know, 1%. Where are they going? Neurodiversity job profiling, very important as well. I was in one of my last roles. I mentioned I went into dyslexia. Yeah, we've got good for time. Yeah. And so they gave me a document-heavy role to perform. They actually gave me what is on the weakest at to do as my main job. So that's very important to understand that it's fit for purpose. Dyslexic-friendly recruitment approach. Standardised tests is only good for neurotypical people. I fail at that. I now no longer apply for roles who have a standardised test. There are other aspects which you need to put into your recruitment approach to say we are disability friendly. We offer and provide flexibility in how you approach that recruitment, such as offering questions up front so that people don't have to think on their feet. Whereas someone neurotypical can, it's a disadvantage and a barrier for someone who might be ADHD or who's dyslexic or even who has autism, and that can help focus on that. Performance, recognising strengths and weaknesses. Again, the fish in the tree as opposed to the fish in the water. Working environment. Making sure that your physical build suits for many different parts of disability. Open plan is not good for some people, and having areas, small quiet areas, is such an important area. Allowing people to have headphones on if a built environment doesn't suit. There are different ways, but being mindful and asking people, and I think that's the biggest thing, is building that community and asking them back and saying, what is it that you need? What do you find frustrating? How do you work the best? Get an advocate in, someone who can talk on behalf of someone who's having problems and be that sort of circuit breaker and go from orange to green as opposed to red to green, and be able to have those soft conversations and being able to, rather than having to go and complain to HR about something called bullying or where it's gone too late, to be able to sit the manager down and go, hey, come on, this guy has these problems, so therefore let's look at and a bit of education. It would help so much. Participate in diversity and disability networks. There's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of them growing. It's a really good way of being able to tap into how other people and what their journeys are and what's working for them and what's not. Leadership opportunity. We talk about gender and how gender is important in the senior roles. Also, starting to build and starting to plan for inclusiveness in the leadership areas, making sure that people with disabilities are at the leadership levels to provide a diversity of thought at the strategic level. So that sort of wraps up my discussion today. So just a quick summary. World of work is changing, new skills and different thinkers are required. Dyslexic individuals have a range of natural strengths, make them hardwired. And workplaces need to adapt recruitment and work practices to attract and take advantage of available talent. And I'll finish off with another meme. Okay, and that is me.
So thank you everybody for coming along this morning, participating in the conversation. It's amazing to sort of play our part in trying to raise the conversations. Brian, that was really great. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. Such a passionate conversation. And have a great day, everyone.
Yeah.
Cheers.